Picture this. You're high up in the remote, jagged peaks of Bhutan. The wind is howling with this insane ferocity that literally strips the warmth from your bones in seconds. This is a place defined by sheer, unforgiving rock faces and an isolation so profound, well, it borders on the alien. Now, other Himalayan giants, they have their tragedies, right? Their trails are littered with the frozen remnants of failed expeditions, but Gangkhar Puensum is entirely different. It is completely barren of human history. It's actually the tallest mountain on Earth that no one has ever climbed. And it's not because the ascent is physically impossible. It's because of a chilling, unspoken reality. Something up there doesn't let people come back. It doesn't repel climbers, it traps them. Welcome to our explainer on the doomed final expedition. Right on day one of the ascent, before the crushing altitude could even begin to take its toll, the expedition hit its first major omen. The team's local guide, a man named Tenzin Dorji, just stopped dead in his tracks. The wind was absolutely whipping his heavy coat around, but his eyes were glued to the ground. He was visibly trembling, outright refusing to look up at the peak looming right above them. When the team leader pushed him to keep moving, Tenzin didn't even argue. He just offered this grave, barely audible warning over the wind. He said, "Everyone says that at the beginning. No one says it at the end." And then he just turned back. He left them to face the mountain entirely alone. Okay, let's dive into this because to understand the unspeakable doom that befell this expedition, we kind of have to walk with them, step by step, right into that freezing fog. Look, this was not some group of thrill-seeking amateurs. The leader was Ethan Carter, a veteran documentarian who was famous for surviving places literally no one else wanted to go. And he brought the absolute best with him. He had Dr. Emily Hayes, a brilliant anthropologist, Marcus Reed, a seasoned wildlife tracker who could read nature like a book, and Daniel Brooks, a totally stoic cameraman whose lens missed absolutely nothing. So we're going to reconstruct exactly what happened to these highly competent professionals using a chronological postmortem of their recovered footage.
Now, you might be wondering, why is this place so untouched? Well, the mystery begins with a total uncompromising ban on climbing the peak. If you ask the bureaucrats, they'll point to official paperwork claiming the ban is out of, quote, respect for local spiritual beliefs. It's a very convenient ink and paper excuse. But if you sit by the hushed fires down in the valleys, the locals, they don't talk about government laws, and they certainly don't talk about altitude sickness. Entire generations of villagers refuse to even look toward the summit. When you really press them, they just whisper this one terrifying truth: the mountain protects itself.
Just stop for a second and really think about the sheer magnitude of 24,836 feet. At this colossal elevation, the air is razor thin. I mean, it literally burns your lungs. The creeping hypoxia starts playing tricks on your mind, and the biting cold feels like crushed glass scraping against your skin. Up there, deep in the eastern Himalayas, you are entirely severed from the rest of humanity. You are utterly, profoundly alone. Or at least that's exactly what Ethan and his team desperately wanted to believe. So the team went up there searching for the origins of these local myths known as the silent giants. But what they actually found was a rapid, brutal descent into primal terror. Guys, it took just 3 days for their rigid scientific expedition to completely melt away into a pure nightmare. We're talking a massive escalation in dread, going from Tenzin's ominous departure straight to the discovery of physically impossible footprints in the snow. And then came the inexplicable radio signals in the dead of night, which culminated in the suffocating horror of hearing something enormous breathing right inside their sealed tent. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the sheer scale of the horror totally crystallized on the morning of day 3. The campsite was eerily silent. There was this fresh, unbroken layer of snow everywhere. Marcus, remember, this is a guy who had tracked apex predators all over the globe. He started brushing away the powder, and he uncovered footprints pressed deep into the blue ice beneath. Now get this, each individual print was nearly 2 feet long. But the true terror, the stride length. The distance between each step was an impossible 10 feet. Think about that. No human, no bear, no known biological organism on Earth moves like that. Whatever made those tracks was absolutely massive. And worse, the tracks were totally fresh. The real psychological torment kicked off inside their pitch-black tent on their very first night at high altitude. They're in there, shivering in their sleeping bags, when the dead silence is suddenly shattered by a sharp burst of static. A trembling, distorted human voice pushes through the radio speaker, weeping, literally begging, "If anyone can hear this, do not come higher. This isn't a mountain, it's..." And then, dead silence. Ethan lunges for the radio, his heart pounding in the suffocating darkness. But here's the catch. The batteries had been taken out hours ago. The casing was frozen solid. The device was completely physically dead. And the exact time that frozen dead radio transmitted its warning, 3:07 a.m. It established this rigid, deeply unnatural pattern, because the very next night, at exactly 3:07 a.m. on the dot, the radio burst to life again. But this time, layered underneath the static and that weeping voice, was a low, deep, resonating hum. It was not human. It felt like standing next to a massive, breathing turbine in the dark. The vibration literally rattled the fillings in their teeth and resonated deep inside their bones, and it sounded agonizingly close. By morning, Daniel the cameraman was just gone. No tracks leading away. Absolutely no signs of a struggle, just his heavy camera left sitting perfectly upright in the snow, still recording the dense fog. When Ethan hit playback, the recovered footage revealed this tall, dark shape in the mist. It had to be at least 9 feet tall, with these incredibly gangly limbs hanging unnaturally low. But the crazy part? It didn't actually walk forward. The physical space between the entity and the camera just seemed to cease to exist. Like missing frames in an old movie, it just abruptly appeared closer and closer, tilting its head to study the lens. The remaining team huddled around the tiny camera screen, pausing the footage so they could digitally enhance the entity's face. And as the pixelation cleared up, a featureless nightmare emerged. It had no eyes, no mouth. It was just this smooth obsidian surface, interrupted by only one thing: a single razor-thin vertical line running straight down the center of where a face should be. And as they stared at that frozen frame, something physically impossible happened. The line on the paused video twitched. It started to widen, accompanied by this implied, sickening squelch of wet tissue. Something underneath that smooth black surface was trying to birth itself. The very moment their brains comprehended that twitching face, they crossed an invisible threshold. The air inside the tent instantly turned to ice. I mean, the temperature didn't just drop, it crashed, unnaturally, plunging to -20 degrees Celsius in a fraction of a second. Condensation crackled and froze instantly against the nylon tent walls. The cold bit into their lungs like literal acid. And in that freezing, terrifying quiet, Dr. Emily Hayes delivered a hushed, trembling realization. She said, "It knows we saw it." And this brilliantly illustrates the terrifying, incredibly clinical methodology of these entities based on the recovered data. You see, they don't hunt like mammals, they literally dismantle reality. First, they approach without walking, completely bypassing physical space. Second, they flawlessly mimic the appearance of their prey. Third, they bridge the psychological gap. They lean in and whisper these maddening, unnatural secrets directly into the victim's mind, bypassing the ears altogether. And finally, the most dreadful step of the whole process: they replace them. This process completely broke Marcus overnight. Remember, this is a hardened man who had fought for survival in the absolute harshest environments on Earth. The morning after they watched that footage, he just stood at the edge of the camp staring with this empty, obsidian gaze right into the turning fog. His survival instinct was entirely gone, just wiped out. It was replaced by this hollow, dead calm. He slowly turned his head to Ethan and delivered this grim final thought. He said, "It's not hiding, it's waiting for us to understand." And right out of the gray mist stepped the horrific culmination of Marcus's realization. A perfect doppelganger emerged. It was wearing the exact same jacket, though if you looked closely, the zipper seemed more like a flat texture rather than a physical object. It wore Marcus's face, but the neck was tilted at this snapped, completely unnatural angle. It glided forward without taking a single step, instantly appearing just inches from the real Marcus. It leaned its face intimately close and whispered something right into his mind. And Marcus, he simply smiled. This eerie, vacant smile, turned around and walked off into the fog. Guys, they weren't being killed. They were being overwritten. At this point, the landscape itself actually began to change. The fog didn't just drift anymore. It inhaled. It started spiraling inward like a massive, rotting lung. In her very last recorded notes, Dr. Emily Hayes experienced an earth-shattering paradigm shift. She realized the locals were completely 100% right. Gangkhar Puensum isn't a mountain at all. It's a quarantine zone. It isn't a peak trying to protect itself from humanity. It is a massive, living lock designed to contain the cosmic horrors gestating inside of it. And Ethan's team? They had just unknowingly turned the key.
So the crucial point is understanding the ultimate trap of Gangkhar Puensum. It functions as a literal info hazard. Staring right into the camera, Ethan finally understood how this entity hunts. It's not strictly physical, it spreads through observation. The more a human mind attempts to conceptualize it, the stronger its tether to our reality becomes. By looking at its shape, by listening to its timeline, by picturing that featureless face and that twitching vertical line in your own mind right now, you've basically invited it in. By simply paying attention to this explainer, you are now observing it. The climax of the recovered footage is a total descent into apocalyptic madness. With this deafening screech that sounded like grinding tectonic plates, the mountain literally tore open, releasing a massive blast of ancient, freezing air. A gigantic, breathing vertical void appeared right in the rock face. Dozens of those 9-foot-tall entities flickered into existence all throughout the fog. And among them was Ethan's own copy, beaming this horrific, overwhelming mental assault of alien knowledge straight into his mind. Realizing that if this footage survived, the entity would spread to millions of people, Ethan lit a flare and charged straight into the grinding, hungry void, desperately trying to seal it. He sacrificed himself to bury the truth. But the final seconds of the footage prove that he failed. The dropped camera is lying sideways in the snow. Suddenly, a figure steps into the frame and casually picks it up. It looks exactly like Ethan. It's wearing his clothes, but as it smiles into the lens, the flesh right down the center of its face suddenly splits with a sickening, wet, tearing sound, revealing that twitching vertical void underneath. The copy calmly whispers, "We made it back." And behind him, the fog is literally swarming as dozens of those featureless faces push outward, pressing themselves right up against the camera lens. The expedition to Gangkhar Puensum wasn't just a tragic mountaineering failure. It was the catastrophic breach of a cosmic lock. The camera obviously made it back down the mountain, the footage got digitized, the observation has spread, and now it resides in your mind too. So we're going to leave you with this final, chilling thought from the recovered data. Some places are not meant to be explored because they are not places at all. There are doors. And once you look through a door, what is stopping whatever is on the other side from looking back at you?